Hey everyone, welcome to the weirdest news in history with me, your host, Ben Chasteen. And tonight I'll be talking about number 5. You can almost never go wrong with vanilla ice cream. It seems like everyone likes it. But would you eat vanilla ice cream made from plastic? Here are the details tonight. And number 4, surgeons were listening to violin music while operating on their patient to remove a brain tumor. This may not be that strange in and of itself, but it was who was playing the violin for the doctors that made it into the weirdest news in history. And number 3, M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, starring Bruce Willis, was a hit in the 2000s and it was based on someone whose bones couldn't break. Now, a family has been found to have a genetic mutation that means their bones never break as well, just like Willis's character. And number 2, in June 1890, a San Diego boy was playing on the hills of Balboa Park when he saw an enormous and monstrous half bird, half beast flying through the air. What was it? And our number 1 story, the disappearance of the Sodder children, is one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries in American history. On Christmas Eve in 1945, 6 children died in a fire that consumed their home. However, their remains couldn't be found, leading to all kinds of theories on what happened to them. Weird enough for you? Stay tuned to hear the weirdest news in history, again with me, your host, Ben Chasteen. All right. I hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. Weirder News Wednesday is also what we're calling it. So, all right, let's just jump into this with number 5, Scoops of the Future. Plastic flavored ice cream that's allegedly safe, probably. That's in a world where we've turned everything from shoes to space rockets into consumables, why not ice cream from plastic, right? Yes, that's literally what you're seeing right here in this clip. If you think this sounds like some dystopian nightmare, yeah, you're right. So, insert Eleonora Ortulana, the UK designer who decided that if worms can digest plastic, why can't we too? I mean, some worms can also eat radioactive material. So does that mean we should eat radioactive material as well? I have to say that our digestive system compared that to a worm would probably be very, very, very different in this case. I wouldn't recommend this. So anyway, Eleonora's project named Guilty Flavors, such a correct name there, was born from her frustration that our recycling efforts are about as useful as a chocolate teapot. I mean, that is kind of true. It's like only 9% of the stuff that we actually recycle actually gets recycled. The rest just lands up in landfills or in the ocean. So she thought, why not take this plastic waste and turn it into something useful? Now, before you all start salivating over the thought of this plastic infused dessert, because I know you really are out there, no one has actually tasted this yet. I don't even think she tasted it yet. I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, why would you make this and not taste it? If you're really that worried about it, why is this even news to begin with? I don't even know. But I guess because she put so much effort into making this. But Eleonora assures us that it's supposed to taste exactly like vanilla ice cream. You're just like as your favorite summer ice cream parlor used to make, minus the love and plus a whole lot of science and chemicals. But so there you have it. I don't know if it's just like, hey, there's this pretty girl doing something. Well, let's just feature this. But anyway, that's what it is. Now, honestly, in some aspects, most people don't even know what natural vanilla flavor even comes from. I don't know what's worse, the natural vanilla flavor aspect or vanilla flavor from plastic, because not all the time. Now they have a synthetic way of doing it, but the natural vanilla flavor is sometimes derived from beaver glands in the anus. That's an honest to God truth right there. Something they don't really say too often. Now they're trying to find a substitute for it. Why can't we just go with the real thing? It's like, well, it's a little more expensive, but it's like, Yeah. Again, this all goes back into the foods that we consume. It's like, would you rather have plastic and beaver glands in your food, or pay a little bit extra for the actual extract? So you could actually buy vanilla beans, not pretty cheap, like Costco, and make your own vanilla if you want. So it's actually cheaper than buying the extract in some cases. But anyway, for myself, I would rather pay a little bit more and buy the extract. If you think about like how many people go out and spend money on like alcohol or partying or whatever, it's just like, hey, just if you're complaining about it, just don't go out one night, buy vanilla extract instead when you know you're getting the real thing and not beaver gland butts or plastic. So there you go.
Hey, Ben, would you try this plastic-derived ice cream that tasted like vanilla?
The thing is, it's like, no, I maybe just to try it, but it's like we consume so much plastic without even realizing it anyway. Like everything is plastic, instead of going after the consumer of like, oh, we need to recycle more, everything. Like, why can't companies just stop making plastic and use like alternative stuff that can just biodegradable products, such as like, canola oil or something like that. I mean, it's all oil anyway. We're just using petroleum. We can just switch over to a different kind of oil and make plastic out of, but that's a whole other conversation. But we do have a whole series about the oil industrial industry and plastic on Rise TV. So if you guys haven't seen that, check it out. Because we put a whole lot of effort into that, and we really expose the plastic and the big oil industrial complex. So with Doyle rules. That's what I was thinking when I said that. Anyway. Okay. Good 80s movies there. All right. Let's go to number 4. Oh yeah, there's our series on the plastic. Yeah, we really went hard on exposing the plastic industry. And the biggest consumer of plastic, Coca-Cola, and the medical biggest consumer of oil, I should say, petroleum specifically, but Coca-Cola and the medical industry, because Coca-Cola needs petroleum to make their plastic bottles, and they're the biggest consumers, or the biggest production of plastic bottles is Coca-Cola. They're slowly starting to change that, but they announced something a couple years ago, but nothing's been done as of now. So it's like, oh yeah, we will do this in 20 years, I guess. But anyway, we'll see what happens. All right, moving on. Number 4, patient plays violin. Yeah, okay. So surgeons, while listening to violin music, were operating on their patient to remove a brain tumor. And this is not that strange. However, it was their patient that they were operating on that was playing the violin for the doctors. Yes, this is 100% true. This is weird. So the musician is named Dagmar Turner, who decided to give her brain surgeons a live concert. This part that is the really strange part is that she did this while undergoing the knife. They were literally removing a tumor while she was playing the violin. And this was at the King's College Hospital in London. So the reason why all this is happening, because I was like, what in the world is going on here? The tumor was lurking dangerously close to the part of her brain that controls the delicate and intricate movements of her left hand. So, for any musician playing guitar, violin, or anything, your left hand, both your hands are very important, but especially for a violinist, So to make sure that the surgical team didn't accidentally turn her into a one-handed wonder, they mapped out her brain beforehand, pinpointing which areas were all about the violin magic. So halfway through the surgery, they didn't just wake her up. They woke her up to actually perform for them to make sure that everything was going smooth with the surgery. So, it's not every day that you see someone playing while their skull is open. That's really weird when you think about it, right? Because I thought she would be like under anesthesia, and it's like, this is super weird. Anyway, According to her doctors, they managed to remove 90% of a tumor while keeping her hand movements in tune. Like, that's just weird to think about. Like, I'm playing the violin in tune as you are removing this tumor. One of her doctors said, quote, "We perform around 400 tumor removals each year, which often involves rousing patients to carry out language tests. This was the first time I had a patient play an actual instrument." So Dagmar went from the operating table back to her orchestra, probably with a new appreciation for the phrase playing by ear. So it's very strange. But I'm glad she's okay. Glad she can keep playing. Glad it all worked out. And even better that they actually filmed it while she was doing it. So that's pretty cool in itself right there. So
That is pretty cool. And
yeah, I
she
mean,
lives,
really,
right? Obviously.
it's definitely something you don't see every day. All right. Number 3, our Unbreakable bone family. So sometimes the real world stories are even more unbelievable than the fiction movies they are based on. In this study, a Connecticut family has been the talk of a scientific community after their unusually high bone density makes them just like Bruce Willis's character in Unbreakable, called the Overseer. That's his name in the movie, whose bones can't break. So for their entire family, get this, their entire family, no one has ever suffered a broken bone or even a fracture. They are said by scientists to have the strongest bones on the planet for like humans, you know. Scientists tested 20 members of this family, which they did not name, and just under half of them found to have this extra bone density. It is hoped that by studying the DNA of these family members with the condition, um, researchers with this condition, researchers will be able to fully understand the factors affecting bone density, which could lead to treatments for osteoporosis or other illnesses and whatnot. So, I mean, I'm wondering if they should all just play sports. I mean, if you can't have a fracture, or like, what do they do? Or if they do any sort of like dangerous jobs. But like, again, it didn't mention the family, so it doesn't go into like what they were doing or who they are, you know. But I am curious to see if there's any follow up to this, because this was from a couple of years ago. I didn't see anything now, but you know, maybe something will come out again. So anyway, pretty cool, pretty fascinating stuff. I wonder why they don't want to be named though. You know, maybe they just didn't want the attention, or I mean, there's a whole family, right? I mean,
Or
you
they're
would
a family
probably,
of hitmen.
yeah, seriously. I mean, that's just crazy if you really think about it. I mean, you could get into fights, you can do all kinds of, I mean, you're like super normal in some aspects. So it's crazy to think about. All right, moving on to number 2 here. The San Diego Dragon, or also known as the Tombstone Thunderbird. Now, I've kind of talked about this, the Tombstone Thunderbird, especially in the 1800s, how a lot of people have seen this, especially out through Arizona. But this is the first time I heard this story. It also happened in the 1800s and 1890s. So a lot of people were seeing this like pterodactyl essentially flying through the area, like 30 feet long. But the San Diego boy named Jimmy Diller was playing on the hills of Balboa Park when he saw this thing. He described it as half bird, half beast, flying through the air with bat-like wings, a long bill, and a tail twisted like a donut. I guess it means it's like its tail was kind of like twisted around, not completely out. So Jimmy said he ducked to the ground, the beast missing him as it flapped overhead, and then it disappeared eastward at great speed, like over the valley area. So he ran home to his father, whose father was a judge at the time. They in the paper it just said J.A. Diller, who was a judge. He was in his study. Said Jimmy was so excited that he broke the family rule: never interrupt the judge at work. He burst in shouting, Father, I've just seen the devil." There was a couple different translations here. Some of them said like, "Papa, I just saw the devil," or "I've seen Satan." I guess depending, it's from the 1800s. So I guess depending on who's kind of telling the story here, but his father didn't believe him. His father was like, he just assumed he fell asleep and dreamed about it, while he was out playing. But then, upon seeing an illustration of the Tombstone Monster printed it's recently in the San Francisco Examiner, Jimmy declared it looked exactly like what he saw. Then on the same day, there was a Mr. Marvin who saw a similar creature swooping over Switzer Canyon. And just like Jimmy, Marvin would attest to its sighting on a stack of Bibles. So like Marvin was like, I swear on a stack of Bibles, I saw this thing flying low, swooping over in this canyon. And then 3 years later, another guy, Samuel Richardson of Santa Ana, watched a black mass, as he called it, big as a house and ugly as hell. That was a direct quote right there. Flying low overhead. He shot and killed a rare species of California condor with a 12-foot wingspan and wrote, the only one I've seen for a long time. But this isn't, I mean, he shot that thing that was a big, huge condor, but what he saw was totally different from the condor. So again, and then when you really start researching the Tombstone Thunderbird, there's been so many reports and reported photos and all kinds of things that are popping up. So, and then just recently, I mean, we've also talked about this on the show, which why I wasn't really going to get into it, but there has been some sightings recently, especially in Texas. So you can find those on previous weirder news that I've done, and also on our Edge of Wonder show. So, all right, let's move on to our number one. Gone on Christmas Eve, the Sodder children disappearance of 1945. This is a pretty sad story, but it's also just mind-blowing what happened here. So the disappearance of the Sodder children is one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries in American history. I didn't even really know that. It really is. On Christmas Eve in 1945, the Sodder children, so there was 9 of them total, or 10 of them, but one of them wasn't there at the house. So there's the 6 children, Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jeannie, and Betty, aged 5 to 14, all died in a fire that consumed their home. However, the weird thing is their remains were never found, leading to all kinds of theories emerging on what really happened to them. So, 5 children, not 6. Yeah, okay. I was thinking it was 6, 5. Yeah. But again, there's 10 total. So some background here. So on Christmas Eve in 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, a fire broke out in the home of George and Jeannie Sodder. At the time, the family consisted of George, Jeannie, and the 9 of the 10 children. Again, they said the fire started around 1 a.m. There's also some reports that it started at 12:30 a.m., so it's kind of conflicting there. Now, while George, Jeannie, and the 4 children escaped, 5 of the children, again, Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, and Betty, were believed to have perished in the blaze. But again, their remains were not found. So the official explanation of the disappearance of them is that they all died in this fire. Now, the alternative explanation entertained by the Sodder parents, the Sodder children who survived the fire, and a network of a lot of other people is that the children were all kidnapped from the burning home as retribution against the family. I'll kind of get into that in a minute. Now, the investigation only brought up more mysteries instead of answers. The local fire department and the police attributed the fire to faulty wiring. However, the lack of human remains seems very strange. The fire chief suggested that the fire was hot enough to completely incinerate the bodies, but this was contested because, I mean, that would have to be extremely hot. I mean, like really, really, really hot to like completely incinerate them. Like, I just can't imagine a house fire being that hot. Now, a follow-up investigation happened in 1949, and they did find small bone fragments, but this is the weird part. They later determined that those small bone fragments were not of anyone from the family. So what the heck is going on? So here's some suspicious circumstances revolved around this whole entire thing. A ladder was found missing from the house, which, if they had a ladder, that could have been useful for a rescue, right? Here's the other weird thing. The telephone lines were cut, preventing a call for help. So, to me, this seems like this was planned. Why would telephone lines be cut like this? George Sodder, the father, his coal truck, which would have been used to reach the children's, because it's a big coal truck. He could have moved it over to the house and jumped on top and got the children out of the top window. It wouldn't start. He tried to start it, wouldn't start. Witnesses reported seeing the children after the fire, either that night or days later. I don't really understand how. I guess it would be that night. I mean, if it happened in the morning, then it's like, going out through the day. So all kinds of theories and things have propped up. Theories and after. So like kidnapping. The Sodder family believed the children might have been involved in a kidnapping, possibly by the
Sicilian mafia.
yeah, thank you, Sicilian mafia, due to their father's outspoken criticism of Mussolini. It's possible. So they even received a photo years later that they thought might be one of their sons, Luis, as an adult, but it led to no definitive answers there. Now, arson is another thing that came up. Some suggested the fire was deliberately set, perhaps as revenge for George's political views or some other personal vendetta. Maybe he rubbed people the wrong way. It's really hard to say. The family also felt that the investigation was not thorough enough, with some suggesting there was a cover up by the police or incompetence. So, I mean, that's another thing that happened. So some also believe that parents made up the kidnapping to cope with the loss of so many of their children dying. But again, that kind of came from the police too. So it's hard to say in this case. So there's been a continued search, even after like all this time, geez, like all this time has passed, almost 70 years. The Sodder family never gave up hope. They erected a billboard along Route 16, offering a reward for information about the children, which stood for decades. I think it went through all the way through the 70s at this point. They also hired in private investigators to follow up on leads nationwide, but nothing really ever turned up. Their mother maintained the site of their home as a memorial garden, and even after her death in 1989, the mystery still persisted, with their descendants still seeking answers. The case has captured the public's imagination for almost 80 years. This is the cemetery where they're buried. There's been articles, books, documentaries, movies, all kinds of things. People trying to understand the truth, people really investigating this. There's some podcasts even that really devoted time to try to figure out the truth of this. However, unfortunately, it still remains this haunting mystery. No one really knows exactly what happened, which makes me think that the mafia probably were involved. And now, unfortunately, most of the family members have died because it's been so long. However, their youngest daughter, Sylvia, is still alive. At least she was, up until a few years ago. She's now in her later 70s, and she continues to search for answers through all of this. Now, there are some things that don't add up. Again, like local police, it's possible they were involved in some kind of cover up. There is suspicion that the arson was set by locals, which would make identification easier and the kids more trusting. So, Mrs. Sodder thought it occurred around 12:30. The report said 1. This is where it gets a little bit confusing. Supposedly, she heard a crash on the roof and then something rolling down the roof. And that's when reportedly the children were supposed to go to bed. So it was said that she wasn't sure if it was like something on the roof or children doing something. The last she knew that the children were seen playing in the front room, which had a curtain open. And Miss Sodder reported that it was still open when they escaped the house. So if it was arson, the children might have saw who said it, especially if there was loud noises on the roof, or people walking around or moving a ladder because the ladder was missing. That makes me think that it's possible that happened. It's also possible they confronted the people who were doing it, and then who told them maybe lies or threatened the children or convinced the younger children to come out with them. I mean, it's really hard to say, but if the children did recognize them, then maybe they did do something to the kids. But the other factor is like maybe they abducted the kids, which doesn't really sound to me. I don't really think that happened because one, the oldest kid there was 14 years old, and it just doesn't. He's pretty old, so it doesn't really make sense to me because if they abducted him, then it's like, maybe they maybe it's possible they abducted him and killed him later. I mean, that is a very strong possibility. I mean, it's really hard to say at this point. Um, Without going there and talking to people and trying to figure out. But at this point, almost everyone that would probably be related to this has died, possibly except for the kids. It's possible if they're alive, there might be alive somewhere. Maybe they're in a shallow grave somewhere. It's really hard to say. But yeah, it's a very strange thing, and it's still unsolved to this day. But hopefully one day we'll have some answers. But yeah, as I was looking to this myself, my conclusion is that I do think it was arson. I do think somebody, it's hard to say what George was doing and what he was doing, especially with the coal mine. What was something going on? Was he trying to make side, like, do something? And who owns the coal mine? There's so many factors at play here. And especially if this coal mine was part of like the town's infrastructure and bringing in, the economy there. I mean, and if he had something on the owners of it or something, it's a very strong possibility. Although it's weird that George lived through this. Like, you would think that they would just kind of go after him and not the kids, but maybe while they were trying to set fire to the whole family, maybe, they got interrupted in the middle of it. And especially it was Christmas Eve. I mean, that's just, I don't know why. Yeah, it's also weird too. So very strange things, but hopefully one day we'll have an answer to this, or more people kind of step forward, or family members, will come forward. So I think eventually we'll probably have some kind of answer to this in the future. So we'll see. But all right, you guys, that's it for our weirdest news in history. I hope you liked this episode. If you have any weird news yourself that you would like me to present on the show, send it over to weirdernews@rise.tv, and I'll definitely look into it and probably have it on the show. So let me know what your favorite one is. Comment below. I like to read those. And yeah, I still think the patient playing the violin one is so weird. Cool stuff. Anyway, hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you for our Friday Night Live. All right, everyone, take care, and I'll see you out on the edge.